What's up guys, and welcome to my Photoshop tutorial. And in this video I'm going to be teaching you photo manipulation as a beginner. So we can call this video photo manipulation for beginners. Let us get started. First of all, I would want you to pardon my voice because I'm having a little cold and catarrh and my voice might be a little bit deep. So do pardon it. And I will run you through the rules of photo manipulation. These are the general rules and it will guide you throughout. But if you are in a class which was organized June 1st to June 4th of 2022, you must have heard these rules because this video was made for that class. And of course, that class was free of charge and we had a lot of participants. But if you are here long after the class and you're finding this video, or you did not participate in the class and you're finding this video, please stick around to listen to the rules. If you were in the class, you can skip to the timeline or the timestamp in front of your screen now to continue in the video. The first rule, guys, is that you should make sure that you know what you want to create before you start Photoshop. If you don't have any idea in mind, please don't start. You can only start when you have an idea in mind, and this will help you know the kind of images you should choose, know the kind of scene you want to create, and know the kind of elements you should download. Second rule is please download high quality images or get high quality images for your work. The third rule is make sure that your lights, angles, and the shadow angles rhyme for all the images. You wouldn't like an image where the light or the shadow in one image is on the right and the shadow in another image is on the left. They should all rhyme and be on one side so that the light will come from one direction. That means if the light is coming from the front, let the shadow be at the back, and so on. Another rule, so guys, is that you should make a good composition with the angles of your images. So the images should be shot in the same angle. When you are selecting images, don't take an image shot from the top view to merge with an image shot from the front view. And lastly, guys, make sure that your images blend very well. This is what you should do in your manipulation in joining those images. Make sure that the colors blend. First of all, of course, I had to create a new document, and in this new document I made it 2000 pixels by 2500 pixels. This is because I want to keep it or give it a ratio of 4:5, and make sure that your resolution is 300 and your color mode is RGB color. And you are working with 8 bits. I can also work with 16 or 32. You can do that, but I prefer working with 8 bits. Background of white and color profile of sRGB. LED pixels with square pixels, and then you save or you create your new document. The next thing I'm going to do is to drag my base layer into this design. And you can actually go to the link in the description and download these images so that you can use it alongside the video. So you can pause this video now and go download these images. After I've succeeded in placing it in the center, I selected the quick selection tool and clicked on the select subject, and it will simply mask out the areas that are not selected and select only the subject. Pressing the Q button will turn every other thing to pink or mask it, give it a pink mask, and then the things that are selected will be in full color. This will help me know the areas that are selected and the areas that are not selected. I will find them and use the polygonal lasso tool to add or remove areas that I wouldn't want in the selection. So if I want an area in the selection, I'm going to use the plus polygonal lasso tool, which I get by holding down shift. So when you hold down shift, it's going to have a plus sign in the polygonal lasso tool icon, and then you start adding the areas you want to add. By the time you are done, you can simply round it off, hold Ctrl and click on an area and to join it with the rest. You do the same for every area to make sure that you add every area you should add. And if you want to take out an area, you can hold down the Alt key and you get a minus sign in that icon, and you can actually take out that area. The next thing I'm going to do is going to select and mask, hold down the shift key and press that icon or that option there, and you're gonna get the refine edge, which is the legacy style that Photoshop used to isolate subjects or selections from the background, and then I can adjust the contrast. When the contrast is high, it will have a very rough edge, so make sure that you keep the contrast somewhere low so that it gets a smooth and perfect edge, but not too low so that it doesn't get too blurry. And adjust the shift edge so that it takes out more parts and prevents me from having white areas along the edge. If you place it on black, you can find out there is a black or white line along this area, and I have to adjust it using the refine edge and get rid of that part. Now that I'm done and satisfied, I can change this to new layer, or you can leave it with new layer with layer mask, and it's going to create this image for you. The next thing I did was to bring the coconut into the image, but before I started working on the coconut itself, I had to go and change the color of the background where the man is staying. For now, he's staying on a white background, but I wanted him to stay in the same color of background as the original picture. So I took a sample color from there and used it to fill the solid color adjustment layer, and then I placed it behind him. Next, I went back to the coconut with the opacity turned down well enough for me to see the head of the man. I started adjusting the coconut so that it will fit in, and the edges of the coconut and the edges of his head will match well. And I dragged it down a little bit so that everything will rhyme well. Now, because of the angle of the coconut, I wouldn't need to rotate or twist or flip this coconut in any direction. And while I was done, I turned on the opacity to 100 and selected the subject. The process is simply the same with what I did while I was selecting the man and isolating him from the background. It's just using the quick selection tool and using the select subject command, and then using the polygonal lasso tool with shift pressed, I added areas that I wanted in the coconut, and with the alt key pressed, I removed areas that I didn't want to be in the coconut. Next up is the refine edge, so I did the same thing. Select, holding shift down, I clicked on select and mask, and I like using this because it's a better option for me than the previous option. The settings were already set to what I wanted, so I didn't need to change so much, and then I started painting. This time around, make sure that your flow is 100 and your brush opacity is 1000 and the hardness is very low, up to 0, and then you hide areas that you want to hide and reveal the areas that you want to reveal. First of all, it's going to be rough. It doesn't matter, we'll still fix that later. You toggle between the foreground and the background color pressing the X key, and this will help you to either hide or reveal areas in the layer mask. So when you use white, you reveal areas in the layer mask, and when you use black, you hide layers in the layer mask. While I was done with that, I had to go back and check for sure what is remaining and what is left. Everything should be neat, everything should be nice. Although this is for tutorial purposes and we might not have a perfect result, we should at least have something very good enough to be presentable anywhere, and to prove to people that yes, you can actually do some photo manipulation. And mind you, the more time you spend on each image in each work that you do, the better the result for you. So make sure you put in enough time and make sure you get a very neat job. Then with the coconut layer selected, I turned it off first to create an edge around the hand, because this hand will be on top of the coconut. So this edge I'm creating around the hand, I'm using the polygonal lasso tool, and I'm just selecting areas around the hand. And the next thing I'm going to do after selecting this area is join them, and when I'm done joining them, the next step is to bring in the coconut, create and select the layer mask because it has already been created, and brush away these areas that were selected from the coconut using the brush tool and black as a foreground color. That will help us reveal the hand. And while I was done with that, the next step was to make sure that I made these selections neat. Holding the control key and pressing or clicking on the layer mask will reveal the areas that were brushed, and to help you refine those edges very well and properly. Be sure to make good use of it. I took away way too much, so I'm bringing back some more, and I had to leave some textures of the coconut on the man's body so that it has a smooth blend in, and that is what I'm trying to do here. The next step was to duplicate the man's head and placing it on top of the coconut layer, and then creating a clipping mask on it. You right click the man's head and you will find out the option of create clipping mask. You do so and it will clip in his head into the coconut, and the reason for this is so that I will blend the coconut texture and his skin texture together. Then I choose lighten. You can play around with the blending modes to see the one that will fit into what you want. Now you have to make sure that the skin texture is not above the areas of the coconut, of the white coconut. It should just be on the sides so that they're fitting very well. So I have to get rid of the excess areas that the skin textures are. Next thing I did was to create an empty layer, select the clone stamp tool and make sure that I have current and below selected, and then I started brushing over the spike to get rid of it. While you are doing this, make sure not to go too far from the colors that are close to that area so that you don't have a selection or a cloning that looks really fake. So while doing this, be careful to follow that rule. You can zoom back to see and be sure that what you are doing is right. I did some more refining and brushing, and as you can see, there is a little faint showing over there at the area of his head, but I left that part because we are still going to cover it, by the way, so there was no need stressing myself over that area. Next step was to drag him down a little because I was going to place something inside that empty coconut, and this is the image or the object I'm going to place. It is already a PNG image, so you don't need to take off the background this time around, but you have to adjust it. The same steps: bring down the opacity, make sure that everything fits in perfectly, resize where possible, adjust and rotate the angles where possible, and you keep on doing this till you make sure that you get the right fit. Next up, you hold down the Ctrl key and click on the thumbnail to make a selection of the objects that you are working on, and then you go down to the refine edge option and turn up the contrast a little bit higher so that you have a more smooth and detailed edge. And when you are done with this, click on OK to save your settings. Now, as you can see, we've lost some very important details, as you can see from the original image compared. And then to get this back, you have to get a layer mask onto that original image and hold down the Ctrl+Shift+I to inverse the selection, and then you can reduce the density of that area by double clicking on your layer mask and to bring out the properties panel. So if I was too fast for you in this video, make sure you double click on your layer mask and bring out your properties panel. There you can reduce the density of the brush, and then you start painting over. Reducing this density will help you see where the brush is hiding or things that the brush is hiding, so that you can restore the ones that you want back. Make sure that you don't reduce the density to 0 because you won't know what is hidden and what is not hidden. So when you are done, you can take the density up. I duplicated it for a backup, and then I selected that one I restored with the original image I cropped out and created a smart object with them. Next step is to put a layer mask onto your meshed image, and with your brush with a hardness of nearly 100, I like going above 50, around 80 to 90, so that I have a hard edge but not so crisp round, because I don't want the edge of a stone or edge of the sword. I just want something smooth like the edge of skin, and then you start brushing over. Now that we've seen the areas that we want to reveal in the juice, you can turn or toggle back your foreground color from black to white, and then start painting over those areas to make sure that you blend them perfectly into the shape of the coconut space. So take your time here and make sure you get a very good result. This one, of course, is a rough sketch for want or purpose of this tutorial. You can also use the eraser tool, but you have to be careful not to do this on a layer, but rather work on the layer mask, because eraser tool is destructive. So when you are using the eraser tool here, the opposite will be the case. of what you get in the brush tool. For instance, black being your foreground color in the brush tool will hide your selection or your image, but white will reveal it. While eraser tool, white will hide and black will reveal it. You can pause this video and try it yourself. Next step is to add shadows to this area of the juice, and I'm going to do that by creating an adjustment layer, the brightness / contrast adjustment layer. Turn down the brightness and contrast to something that you would love. Clip it into the coconut or into the juice, sorry, and invert the selection by holding the Ctrl I keys, and then you start painting with the flow as low as somewhere between 20 and 30 or even lower than that. Start painting gradually over the areas that you want the shadow to show. Be sure to get this correctly, and when you overpaint, you can always turn off the foreground color or change it to black and repaint that area. Zoom back and forth to make sure that you get what you want very well. Next step is to add highlights to the image so that it will match the highlights on the man's head. So you're going to create another brightness and contrast adjustment layer. Take your brightness high and bring down the contrast, and then you invert the selection and start painting on the areas that you want the highlights to show. Make sure that your flow is low enough, or if you want a higher level of flow, you can always adjust it and paint all over the areas that should have some more light on it. You can play around the blending mode to see what will work. In this case, I used hard light and then I turned down the opacity a little. I compared the difference between hard light and normal to see if there was a significant difference. I liked the difference and I went ahead with it. I added some more adjustment layers of brightness and contrast. As you can see, the brightness and intensity of the light in the forehead is not the same with that at the side of the head, so I had to use another layer, and I kept on doing this and painting it till I got what I wanted. Make sure that your result is very subtle and don't overdo it so that you don't get an ugly or mixed up image. Next step, which I almost forgot, was to add the straw, and as usual you adjust, you resize, you reshape, and you keep on twisting and turning until you get the right angle and place it in the right size and position that you want, and then creating a layer mask on it. I started brushing to take away the excess parts that I don't want, and make sure that you get this very neat. You can adjust the hardness of your brush to get even a better result. If you look closely, you find some white artifacts around the straw. This is not a problem because we are going to fix it now. Hold the Control button and click on the thumbnail of the straw. Go down to the select and modify, and then you go down to contract. With 2 pixels we can get rid of that straw, but then you also have to click on Ctrl Shift I to select inverse, and then with the layer mask selected you can start brushing the area. So brush out all the excesses, make sure that they are neat, and as you can see, they are. The next step is now to add a background to this image because it is really dull and boring, and I will also add some blur to that background. So now that I have resized it, selecting the layer which I want to add the background on top, I will go and find my background now and place it and adjust it to the right side and measurement. This is the background of a ranch, and I think it will be really nice for this image. Next thing is to select the background and add a blur to it using the tilt shift rule. The tilt shift will help us get a progressive blur effect. Progressive in the sense that it goes from 0 to the point you choose. Let's say you chose 100 as the blur, it will go from 0 to 100, and I am adjusting it and rotating it so that it will fit with the alignment of that fence, or it will just align with the fence rather. When you're done with that and you like what you have gotten, you press on OK, and now we have the blur. Then when you're done with that, you have to start now to blend the image and the background together so that they will have a uniform color code or color combination. if that makes sense. In this, we are going to blend the background with the image. You can actually choose to blend your image with the background, whichever way that works for you, it is fine. To some people, it is easier to blend the image with the background. To some others, it is easier to blend the background with the image. So look at what works for you and do that. In this case, I use the selective color adjustment layer, and how this works is that this side that has the CMYK or the cyan, magenta, and yellow and blacks all are opposite of the RGB. So the cyan is opposite of R, which is red, magenta is opposite of green, which is blue, and yellow is opposite of blue, RGB, blue. Okay, so and white is the opposite of black. So where you have black and you reduce the blacks, you are adding more white. So in this case, I'm working on yellow and I am adjusting it to fit in. Now reducing the blacks, I added more white, and increasing the yellows, I added more yellow obviously. Reducing the magenta, I added more green. And you will get the hang of it when you practice more with this effect. Now that I'm done with that, you can see the before and the after. It has kind of taken away most of the reds in the image and left just a little. I didn't want the reds to be too much because I didn't want it to start looking shouty. Next is to add the curves adjustment layer to the background to just add a little bit of contrast. As you can see, the man himself has so much contrast on his body. There are areas that are really bright and areas that are really dark. And next step is to adjust and blend in the juice on top of his head. In that, I'm going to use the selective color adjustment layer once more and do some little adjustments. You can take your time in this area and make sure that you get something that is really looking good. Remember, this is a tutorial, and for time, we wouldn't spend the whole eternity working on one thing. Now I think they are all blended in, at least for now. I would want to make the man's face brighter. So I would have to find the layer of where his face is in, and I will add a brightness and contrast adjustment layer, increase the brightness and reduce the contrast. This time around, I will make sure it is at the right spot. And now that I've placed it there, Ctrl I to invert the layer mask, reduce the flow so that you don't have a harsh or quick painting on what you are doing. You have to paint gradually and slowly so that you get the exact result that you really need. So I'll just add some light in his face, in front of him, not so much everywhere, but just places that light, I feel light should be, and then increase the transparency, or in other words, reduce the opacity. Next step is to add water droplets to his face. So I got this image of water droplets and placed it in the right area I think it should be, resized it so that it will look real, and right clicked. Before I clicked on enter, I had to right click first and find the warp tool. The warp will help me adjust the water droplets so that they will angle and move in a way that is synonymous to the person's face. You can add anchor points to the warp by simply right clicking and choosing options for yourself. And when I'm done, I have to create a negative clip layer mask on it. A negative layer mask will simply hide the layers by holding the Alt key and clicking on the layer mask button, and then you simply start painting gradually. I turned the flow up to 100 because I don't need it to be soft or low. I don't need to be careful in this case. I just need to review what I need to review. Then I noticed that there is an area in his face that is missing the water droplets. So I duplicated the same water droplets, and with my brush tool I started adjusting it, hiding the areas or the droplets that I didn't want to show, and revealing the ones that I think will be good if they show. You have to do this carefully and neatly, and if you must also warp again to fit into the face, please do so. In this case, I didn't need to warp anymore. When you're done with that, go to the top most visible layer of your design, and on your keyboard hold down the Ctrl, Alt and Shift keys and press E. This will give you a single layer that has all the layers inside it. Right click on it and convert it to a smart object. Then you go to filter and you find camera raw filter or you can use Ctrl Shift A to go into that. If you don't have camera raw filter in your own Photoshop, you can download it as a plugin, or you can get a better version of Photoshop. From Photoshop 2020, I believe, will have camera raw filter. What you are going to do in the camera raw filter is simple color grading, because this will affect every part of your image. Although some effects may affect some part of your image, like the highlights will affect the bright areas of the image and the shadows will affect the dark areas of the image, but it's going to affect all dark areas and all white areas, irrespective of the fact that it might be on the juice or on the background. So you have to be careful with what you are doing here and make sure that you get everything right. You can go and come back to see your image to see how good it becomes, or you can just take a break, maybe one day or an hour or two, just to get your eyes off the image. Come back and look at it with a new fresh eye to see if that looks good. When you're done, please press OK and look at your image, the before and the after. Look around, feel free to check it, feel free to go back and see if you can adjust a few things. Look at it very well, and if you are satisfied with what you have done, please export your design and save your work, and you are done. And guys, we have come to the end of this tutorial. If you loved it, feel free to like the video by pressing that like button, and subscribe if you love the channel. Turn on the notifications and also invite your friends to be here as well to learn. See you next time, and goodbye.